Alright, so in this tutorial we want to actually be able to fire this rocket that we made here whenever we hit the space bar, which is kind of cool. So I'm actually going to delete this rocket from our stage. Okay, so it's deleted, but we don't have to worry because we made a prefab and it's got all of those changes that we made. Remember, we typed in the value in the editor, all saved in this rocket prefab, and that's the power behind it. So let's take a look at our actual movement script, and we really should have named it like ship script or something, and we still can. So let's go ahead and create a function. We can do it right above this void on GUI, and we're just going to say, you know what, let's do this in update. That might actually be better because our update's looking kind of lean. So let's think about it. I want to press the space bar, right, and make it fire a rocket. Alright, so how the heck do we do that? Well, I can go in here and just sort of tinker around and go to project settings, input, and I could say, okay, does anything in here even remotely look like a space bar, or like I can press a space bar? Or I could even look on the Unity reference. Let's see if I can bring that reference up. And I could type in spacebar, or yeah, let's type spacebar and see if anything comes up. Nothing. Let's see if we type in the word space. Oops. So there's some other stuff. There's GUI layout, key code space. Let's see what that is. So space key. Okay, so let's see if that works, if that's our space bar. We could also just ask, like we can Google Unity space bar code. How can I shoot with this? Somebody asked this question, and you can kind of look through, and you know, this is somebody wrote this in C#, and you could say, oh, here we go, input get key down space. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a shot. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and I'm going to do what I know, right? And what I know is, if I type if, it's a way of checking a condition. So if something happens, I want to do something else. So I can say input, just like it said in the code I found on the internet, dot get key down. Here we go, pretty cool. And that's a method. And I'm going to write space, just like that website. Okay. So right now, if I hit the input dot get key down space, it's going to do something. So let's go ahead and type debug dot log. We learned this guy before. Space bar is pressed. So let's put that in here. Space bar is pressed. Alright, I'm going to hit Control S and press play. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll press space bar. You can see space bar is pressed. We can even take a look at the console to see if it continually reads it. You can see every time I press the space bar. Okay, perfect. Okay, so how the hell do we get a bullet to fire out of our key press, right? So I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we know that this block of code works. Well, what we can do is, first, we need to store our rocket in a variable, okay? Now, remember how we attached a rigid body to our rocket prefab here? Well, we have to create a variable that's storing our actual rocket object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a public variable, and I'm actually going to call it rigid body, and I'm going to call it rocket prefab. I want to make sure my camel casing is correct, so rocket prefab. Alright, let's hit Control S and save that, and let's look in our editor. Let's select our player prefab. You can see here that we have a global variable called rocket prefab, which is pretty awesome. I'm just going to drag my rocket prefab and drop it in there. So cool, so that worked. Now I want to spawn a rocket prefab. Well, I know from experience that I can actually just type the words instantiate, and I can wrap that in parentheses because I'm pretty familiar with this instantiation code, and I know that the instantiation code takes 3 parameters. Okay. One is whatever it is I'm trying to instantiate. Okay, so I want to actually I want to instantiate my rocket prefab. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I want this prefab to be spawned directly from the current position of my object. So this is the current position and this is the current rotation. That's what the three things that's located within instantiate. Now, so I can just type transform dot position, and then I want to do transform dot rotation, and let's go ahead and hit Control S and see what happens. Alright, so I'm going to press spacebar, and you can see now we're firing rockets from the current position. Now there's actually a little problem here. When I press the spacebar down, the force of that sphere is actually shoving my my cube down because they're interacting with each other. Okay, so there's a couple ways to fix that. I can actually remove my box collider here, so let's press play. You can see now that I press play, it actually just fires out at the center of my cube. Okay. Now this could cause problems later, and you can see they're all deleting once they get to that top position. Now that could cause issues later, and the reason is because with the actual interaction, when our enemy ship hits our player, but we'll get to that later. So I'm just going to hit Control S for now because we have this. All right. So let's see if we can script up an enemy really quickly. All right. So what I'm going to do here is in my characters folder, in the NPC folder, I'm going to create a prefab, and I'm going to call it enemy ship prefab. Okay. Let's go ahead and create another game object. I'm going to make a kind of limited on shapes here. I'll just a sphere. Alright, and I'm going to create a material, and I'm going to call this enemy material. Throw it on here. Let's do self-illumination, diffuse, and let's make it red. Alright, so I'm going to position him right above here. Alright, let's name him enemy ship too. Alright, so let's quickly create a folder, call it enemy scripts, because say there's like other stuff we want to do to our enemy, and we want to create a C# script, and we're going to name this enemy script. Let's fire this up, and let's just type up some code really quickly. So we know from past experience how to move an object, right? All we have to write is transform dot translate, right? Let's see if I could do that right. There we go. Translate, open close parentheses, vector3, and you probably guessed dot down, because we want our character moving down towards our ship. So vector3 dot down times, let's go ahead and make a variable, an integer, a public integer called enemy speed. We can make that equal to 5 for now. So vector3 dot down times enemy speed times time dot delta time. So let's hit Control S, and let's throw this enemy script on our enemy ship. Come on, compile already. Let's press play. He's now moving down, which is good. And they're lined up so they're colliding with each other. Right? me see if I can finish this up really quick. I was trying to keep the video under 10 minutes, but so let's just say this. We don't want to continuously be respawning these guys, so we want to actually, once the position of our ship reaches the bottom, so if, let's figure out how far that is. If he goes off of stage, which is, let's see what -2 sends him, minus 2.5? Yeah, 0.25. Okay, so if his transform, and we want to do his y position dot y equals, we want to say equals or is the same as, because if we just do equals, we're going to be assigning -2.5 to the position. It'll give us an error. We're going to actually transform dot position. We're going to move him to, so now we're going to say equals, I don't know where we're going to move him to. Let's see. Move him to 4.5 maybe? And that'll kind of give us a little bit of a delay. So 4.5 semicolon. Alright, let's hit Control S and save this and press play. And looks like we have, I forgot to do vector 3. It does not like this transform. Okay, I think, here we go, dot Y. Let's hit Control S. What's going on here? Transform.position.y equals 4.5. If transform is the same as -2.5. Okay, so we're getting an error on how to sort of move the position back to the top. And what I'm discovering is inside of C# you can't just send the position by assigning it this way. It has to, it's a little bit more complicated, but not by much. So if our transform.position.y hits -2.5, or is the same as 2.5, let's go ahead and hopefully this works. Let's create a vector and a variable in here called vector3, and we'll name this temp for temporary location, and it equals the current position. So transform.position. So right now this temp is storing the current position. And what we're going to say is temp's y position is equal to wherever we want it to be. So let's say we want the y position to be, I think it was 4.5, is that right? Yeah, I think it was 4.5. Okay, and so we can't use an integer because we have a decimal point there. So let's give this a shot. So temp's y position equal to 4.5, and if you write an f, it stands for float, okay, and that means like a decimal value, kind of like a double. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the current position. So again, transform.position equal to 4.5 or temp. Alright, let's hit Control S and see if this even remotely works. And it does not work. Okay, let me pause the video and give that another. Okay, so with that said, alright, so I figured it out. So if I press play, you'll notice up here that the sphere falls and it repeats to the original location. So what was the problem? This is the issue. Couple things. One, it's less than or equal to -2.5. So sometimes it can miss, it can go beyond 2.5, and it won't catch. So it's important that we make it less than or equal to 2.5. And then we have to actually assign the current position to a variable, and sort of something that's totally different than the Unity script that's in C#. So we create a new variable called vector3, and when you assign a new variable called vector3, you can store the x, y, and z position of an object. So I'm going to make it equal to all of the positions, so x, y, and z. So now this has, I can access temp.x, temp.y, temp.z. So what I'm going to say is temp.y's y position equals 4.5f, And so I'm just going to set the current position, transform that position of an object to negative or to 4.5. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we'll look at ways of making it random so it jumps all over the scene.